Hello and welcome to Class 3 of the Photoshop Skillshare series. This is the third class of the series, and perhaps you took the first two before this one, perhaps you're brand new and you just want to hop in for the pen tool and typography. That's absolutely fine. I'll try to do my best to make you guys feel comfortable along the way and not repeat too many things that I did in the other classes. Okay. Let's start by creating a new document here. By default, I'm just going to go, let's say 800 by 800 pixels in size. Okay, so we need to have a resolution at 72 because we're just designing something for the screen. Color mode as RGB again, and then we need to make sure that we don't have any of these advanced settings checked. They're all okay for now. All right, so I'm going to name this, let's just name it Pen Tool Exploration. Okay, and then click Oh Right. So I pressed F to go into this full screen mode. I'm going to make sure my graphic is at, or my canvas is at 100%, which I did by clicking that 100% button up there. With my zoom tool selected, that's important to know. Alright, so the thing you need to know about the pen tool is basically it's very finicky and it takes a lot of work to get the hang of. So this first exercise, I just really want you to be able to feel comfortable using the pen tool and understanding its interactions and limitations. So let's go first by finding the pen tool over here in our toolbar. It looks just like this, just like a little pen nib here. The shortcut for a pen tool is P. So if I click on here or press P, we have the pen tool ready to go. Okay, so as I mentioned in the first class when I went through the tools briefly, there are two things that the pen tool does. It makes paths and it makes shapes. So I'd like to start out by making shapes first, and then we'll move on to paths. And this shape exercise is really just to get you familiar with the pen tool and understanding how the pen tool works. And then later on we'll get on to something a little bit more advanced and make those shapes. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is get a color selected. So this is the time when you want to grab your favorite color in the fill section here. You can do it this way by clicking in here and bringing up the color picker. You can pick a swatch here. I prefer the color picker, as I mentioned before, because it's a little bit larger of a view and I can really see what I'm doing here because this is much larger. So I think that I will go with maybe like a nice teal color, just like this. You can pick whatever color you'd like. Okay, so I have this color selected as my fill for my shape. And as you see, if I create a new layer first, I'll title this new layer just for now. As I'm clicking around with my pen tool, it's making this shape. Okay? Very easy. But let me just do Command Z to go back in time. Go to our history palette, go further back. You can see I'm going back in time. And again, we'll cover this on another lesson later. So you don't need to know that. If you wanted to, you could just delete your layer whenever you're frustrated with your pen tool progress. So start over by creating a new layer. And then let's just draw this way. So again, points, points, points. And as I've mentioned before, once you want to complete your shape, you always need to click back onto where you originally started. So I'm going to want to click onto this original point here, and I'll see that little circle. It's an unfilled circle that is connected to my pen tool there. That is the icon that indicates that you are about to close your shape. Okay, so I've closed my shape now, but I'm still on the pen tool, so I can't move my shape around just quite yet. To go back to the move tool, I press V or just click up here on the move tool, and I can move my shape around. I can do Command T to bring up that transforming box, and then I can resize my shape just as any other shape. Okay, but what about shapes that we don't want to just be straight, jagged lines? What about curves? Now here's where the pen tool gets really complicated. So let's create a new layer, title it Curved Shape. Okay, so I beg you to stay with me here because this is where it gets tricky. Making curves. Okay, to start out making curves, I will make one point. I'll make another point, but once I make the other point, I have to hold down my mouse and then drag. Okay, so to make the next point, I click my mouse, I'm holding it down still, and now I'm dragging down or dragging up any direction. And you can see how my shape is about to change and curve as I'm doing that. So I'm still holding down and dragging. They give you this helpful little line to show you where you are with your shape and what it will look like, what that curve's going to look like, which is very helpful. Thank you, Photoshop. So once you're satisfied with this curve, you just let go. And now I have my curve. All right, so the extra tricky part here is the next curve. So Photoshop does this really, really kind and generous thing, bless its heart, where it tries to make your shape look as natural as possible by continuing the curve for you. So if I just clicked over here, let's click over here for instance. Watch what happens when I click. See what it did there? It made a natural curve for me that flowed seamlessly from the last curve, which is really nice of Photoshop to do that. If I click and drag, my mouse is still clicked on there. It's still giving me that curve that has that natural edge to it, which is really nice of Photoshop. That's so kind of it. But what happens if, say I wanted to make a sharp edge here rather than a curve, I just want it to be a straight line. If I click here, it does the natural curve again. So that's a problem. I'm going to press Command Z to undo. Alright, so if you have a curve and you don't want Photoshop to give you that natural curve, here's what you do. You make your last point, you put your mouse on top of it, so where you get that little slash, and then you hold down Alt or Option, same key on a Mac keyboard, until you get that little arrow. Do you see that little arrow? It was the dash, and now you get the arrow. So once I have the arrow, I can now click, and then click and make my straight line. See what happened there? So now I want to complete my shape, so I go back to the original point and click to complete. Okay, let's do that again. Bring up my pen tool by pressing P or clicking on the pen tool. My first point I can do whatever I want with. Second point, if I want it to be curved, I click to the second point and then hold my mouse down and drag. See? Click, hold, and drag. And then find the perfect curve for whatever you're doing. Let's do it this way. My third point, say I want to make this not a curve, I just want to do a straight line. I would hold my mouse over the last point I made till I get that slash, then press and hold Alt or Option, and then click. And now I can make my straight edge. See what happened? If I want to make another curved point after this, I would click where I want and then hold and drag, make the curved point. If I wanted to make yet another curved point, I'll click, and look, Photoshop's doing that natural curve, which is great, really helpful. So I continue that, let go. But now if I want to make a straight point again, what do? I go to this last point, hold my mouse over it, it shows that slash, so now I press Alt Option until I get that little arrow, and now I click, and now I can make my straight line. And now I can keep just making any kind of thing I want by holding down. If I want to make a straight line, press that, and here's my weird, very strange shape. Lots of curved edges and whatnot. So say I want to edit something about my shape along the way. Maybe I'm not happy with this curve here, maybe I'm not happy with this curve. That's okay, we can actually edit this and change the shape later on. So I'm going to use my Move tool to move it down. Do you remember our direct selection tool from before? We're going to use that again for this. And that's really where you can take those path points and you can manipulate them a little bit. Okay, so if I click on my direct selection tool, you can see that I have all of these path points ready to go. They're all lined up waiting for me. So if I click one, I can move it around like so. If I click a curved path point, say this one for instance, I get these lines here, and you probably remember these lines from when we were making the shape together. These lines show you where your curve is at. So if I grab and hold the lines, I can change the actual curve itself. Quite nice. And this really comes in handy as you move along. If you move it down, the curve gets a little shorter and fatter, and so on. And again, I can just move the point itself, and that's fine too. So I can really do a lot to edit the shape once it's finished. So whenever you have your shape to where you think it's closed and done, it's not actually. You can go back and edit these curves and these points at any time you'd like. And again, I can select by pressing shift and holding another point. I can select more than one point, and I can move them all like so. I've never really found an actual application to do that, but I challenge you to find one, and it's a good thing to know how to do. All right, so I highly encourage that you play around with the pen tool, making shapes, just to get yourself familiar with the interactions, because it's really something that you really do have to get the hang of, and it's not something that comes natural to most people. So please just work a little bit with the pen tool, making shapes, and then we'll move on to actually using the pen tool to make paths, and we're going to cut someone out of a photo. All right.